Hi. So this one is going to be more experimental. So the first one, I was kind of reading from the document and partially just talking and stuff. But this time, I'm just gonna stare into the screen and just, like, talking like to a normal person. I'm sorry if I sound weird. I still haven't recovered from laryngitis or whatever it's called. Um, so what I would like to talk about is judgment. So, and how people judge things and the way I see it. So, it all stems from the thing that I talked in the first video, that one thing that makes humans different. And it all comes to ego. And because of ego, we see the world we see. So we're subjective. And it all combines with our brain not liking empty spaces. And to fill these empty spaces, our brain sometimes does really weird stuff, and it just fills it with whatever just is at hand, because keeping it empty is not an option. And so, what often is used as a tool to fill that empty place is judging people, and judging just not only people, just judging, right? And as we know, judging is mostly subjective because people are not serious about judging. They just do it casually most of the time, right? So whenever, I don't know, if I'm in a kindergarten and I'm 7 years old and Martin slaps me, I'm thinking, damn, Martin is a dumbass. And that is a judgment. And according to my knowledge, my previous experiences, and my personality, the judgment is the way it is, right? But there's a thing that I noticed, that there's a huge wall that many people don't get over even after many, many years. So it might be that a person, when okay, so the same guy who Martin slapped, right? He's like, oh my god, he's a dumbass. He's now 40 years old. That guy who made a judgment, and he'll make the same exact judgment about the other person, maybe in more complex circumstances, but still. And I started noticing people hitting these walls not because they're like trying to get over them, but they can't. It's just that the amount of effort needed to get over that wall that I'm going to talk right now about is so huge compared to what came before, that people don't even know this wall exists. It's that enormously gigantic. And that wall is being good at judging. So let's take an example with Sam Martin, right? So if I would look at Martin slapping that guy, let's say Andre, right? Martin slapped Andre. What I would first look at, because I know philosophy, I know psychology, and I can understand that behind every action there's a reason, and because there's a reason, I know that Martin slapped Andre for a reason. It might be that he's being abused in family, or Martin has issues controlling emotions, and it wasn't like so as intentional as it might seem, and stuff like that. And I can do such analysis of the situation because I've climbed over that wall. And I've been thinking about how do I explain a person that this wall exists, right? Because it's like, imagine telling a little kid that somewhere there in the space, there's this gigantic supernova that is bigger than we can actually see, right? We're not able to see it. And if we're too close, it's just too big for us to like see it as a whole. And you have to explain that it like emits specific particles, and it's able to burn entire pieces of space, and it's like super bright, and it's this and that color, and it consists of these materials. Like, a kid wouldn't be able to understand it. And I know what you're thinking. Comparison of an adult person with a kid might sound very how should I say it? I don't know the word in English. It doesn't sound good. Let's just stop on that. So What I mean is that how do you explain to a person something that a person has never seen, never felt, never heard, never thought of, and never heard of, right? So how do you do it? So what I was thinking first about judgment is telling a person uh, in emotions, right? So people are usually using emotions when they're judging. So they get emotional and their judgments become, uh, they get flaws, their judgments. And the first thing I experimented with, that I tried, was getting people emotional, and while they're emotional, explaining them what judgment is while they just experienced it, right? So if I cause harm to a person, that person judges me, and then right after that I'm talking about that event and I explain that the person just judged me based on emotions, and then the person realized that that person judged me, he, she, doesn't matter, that person judged me, and it worked, but not the way I needed to, because it was a 2 or sometimes even 3-step process. So in best case scenario, a person needed to understand what I'm saying. So he already understood what I'm saying. Then he needed to realize, well, what is that? Like become conscious, and then climb over that wall. In worst case scenario, a person wouldn't be able to understand what I'm talking about. Then I had to explain a lot of terms and a lot of stuff. Then that person maybe would understand, and it would have to become conscious about it, and only then climb over that wall to see that judgment is more than just calling someone a dumbass. So it didn't work out. And then in summer, I figured out a somewhat complex, but I think that's the best way I can explain judgment for now. Is judgment generally consists of 3 parts, right? It's being a good analyst, it's being a good psychologist or psychiatrist, that doesn't matter, a person of psychotherapy, and being a good judge. So 3 parts. And so whenever a person that is conscious, right? So if a person is conscious about judging and wants to climb over a wall, every time a person catches itself on trying to judge someone, that person needs to ask itself, am I a good judge in this situation? Am I a good psychologist in this situation? And am I a good analyst in this specific situation? And if at least 2 match, then it's a green light. If 3, then you probably shouldn't be at this point, right? You're like, you're really good at this in this specific case. And so I found out that people people see this system too complex, and it's like, you come up to a person and you tell them, okay, so before drinking water you need to make a triple backflip and then dance and then do a break dance, right? A person would be confused. It's, of course, it's an over exaggerated example, and it sounds very weird, so I'd call it like an autistic example, so I'm sorry if it's like not understandable. It's just that you add so many layers to such a simple thing as judgment that some people are just like, nah, ICBA. And but if a person is like, okay, I want to do this, then a person has to become so serious about judging people that it would take a lot of time researching and learning new stuff about being a good analyst, about being a good psychologist, and about being a good judge. So let's talk about these 3 things. What do they even mean? So first, a good analyst. So analyst and psychologist are somewhat similar, but analyst is a psychologist in this specific case. Analyst is a psychologist without knowledge of human behavior. So being a good analyst means that you're conscious about cause effect relationships. You know how do they work, and how some events lead to other events and how to connect these things. You know how to analyze the information, gather it up, find clues and connections, and make a string of cause-effect relationships. And also, that is not mandatory, but also presenting that, right? The material that you've analyzed, it's also important. So that's being an analyst. Being a psychologist. Being a psychologist is mostly just knowing how people work, right? Even the simplest thing. If you hit a person, it gets mad because it doesn't understand, right? It's a simple thing, but sometimes it's enough for this uh, analyst, psychologist, and judge sequence to be complete. So sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, but mostly, psychologist takes the biggest effort to become efficient at, because we live in a world where humans are related to most things, right? If we don't talk about pure nature, where there are only animals, only nature, like rocks, trees, mountains, water. If we talk about society, psychologist takes the biggest hit and like the biggest pressure of knowledge. And sometimes you can get away with basic knowledge, but most of the time, the more you know as a psychologist, the less pressure there is on other spheres, and the more precise judgments you can have. But there's a problem. Like psychological knowledge is most complex of all of that, which means that the further you move in psychological knowledge advancement, the less people will understand you, even if you're good at explaining, right? So if, what would be an example that wouldn't get me in trouble? If a person that doesn't know about all of this hears from me that Martin slapped Andre not because he's a dumbass, but because he's being abused at family, or because he is bad at controlling emotions, I might get some backlash because that person doesn't know how things work. But if that person is at least conscious about um, judgment or open to any kind of information, so like the person doesn't have to be smart or intelligent to be open to information, right? Then he might be, okay, that sounds weird, but I'll actually think about it. So I won't get backlash, but it's super rare. So being good at proficient at psychology in the sequence is, I wouldn't say dangerous. I mean, it's probably the best word. It's dangerous. It might be dangerous for your relationships, because sometimes you cannot explain things for a person to understand if a person doesn't want to understand. So psychology combines with analyst abilities to create cause-effect relationships, why a person behaved, where it comes from, what it can result in, which can allow you to predict people, uh, and sometimes it can also help you. It can also help you to help people. I don't know. It sounds weird. Yeah, help you to help people, and also like predict what problems a person can have. Not like predict, like if you know what happened in the past, but you know that you haven't seen it all, you can, assuming what caused events in the past, you can predict what theoretically can happen in future, and asking specific questions about how would you react to this and that event, you can become more precise at what exactly is happening with that person. So that's about psychology. And next is judgment. So judgment is, so being a judge, right? So being a judge, in my opinion, is the last step, is the very last step. It's like, these stamps that you put on mail or like on documents. So the judge part is a stamp, is the last final thing. So it also, wait, no. Okay, my bad. So I also wanted to talk about judge affecting emotions, because whenever you're judging, it is very beneficial to keep emotions away. And judge, the ability to be a good judge, is what affects being able to stay away from emotions. Because, for example, if we take court, right? I don't know is the right word, where real judges that work as judges are judging people. It is important for that judge to stay away from emotions, to evaluate situations based on law. And if emotions get in the way, it might go into the wrong direction. So it might not be based only on law. So that is why it's important to stay away from emotions, as well as judge is controlling the how to say it, controlling when does a judgment stop, right? So sometimes it is unnecessary for a psychologist part to go further. You can explain this and that and why this is happening, but sometimes it's unnecessary for understanding, and sometimes explaining more might be more harmful than being short but understandable. And as I said, judge is putting that last stamp of the judgment itself, the result, the statement, the judgment. And all these things, these all specific things, analysts, psychologists, and judge are being taught in specific institutions. And at some point I realized that I might be special, that I am able to gather all this information without being in any specific institutions and be able to judge well. And I might be asking too much from people when I explain them that you need to be this, and that to be good at judging. So I'm putting such conditions that many people won't be able to meet ever in their lives. It also might be related to me being um, autistic, like Asperger's syndrome, and like somewhat ingenious that I'm able to do this. So I realized that it was me undervaluing myself and overvaluing others, which comes, which as in judge part, where the statement is, it is pointless or nearly pointless to teach, not to teach, but to explain how judgment works without teaching it extensively. Which leads me to a sad understanding for me, it's sad for me, that people will always judge the way they do, which is subjective. And no matter what I do, I won't be able to make people get better at it. Because even if they want to, it's such a complex thing if you go deeper in it, that it's either not worth it or it's too complex for a person to care. So yeah, I think that's it about judgment. That's what I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I might have missed something because I haven't written like the points that I wanted to talk about because it was kind of freestyle. But I'm honestly very happy with the result. Well, because it was kind of flow state. So yeah, thanks for listening. Have a nice day, and keep rocking.